Let's talk about the next SPSFC quarterfinalist that I'll be reviewing. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Echoes of Another Earth by J. Daniel Layfield, and this is the next one, continuing Sci-Friday with my SPSFC, our 6 quarterfinalists that we are going through and recommending. We're going to be winnowing this down to 3 to move on to the next round, and this was the next one up. Now, Echoes of Another Earth, if you saw me mention it in one of the previous updates, this one starts out where we have our main character, Josh, who basically, when he's here, and then the world ends, and he dies, and then all of a sudden he wakes up as like an alternate version of himself in like an alternate dimension, basically. And this has been happening throughout his life, again and again, basically, where some sort of cataclysm will happen, and then he wakes up and is a different version of himself. So we're introduced to that, and then we also are introduced to a much more technologically advanced group of people who are able to travel between dimensions and are kind of like looking at some disturbances that are happening, trying to figure out what's going on. And so that was the introduction, and I was pretty interested in this one. I thought it sounded really interesting. This is unfortunately another one where I think it's my expectations based on reading around the first 10% versus what I got with the rest of the 90 didn't quite match up to what I was looking for. And honestly, this one, the big thing was just kind of the tone for me. This didn't feel like it was going to be super dark or anything like that. I'm not saying that. But it had a pretty interesting premise. Seemed like it was going to be, fairly serious, starting out maybe with some levity. But by the end of it just kind of felt almost like a, TV, like a live action, but like a TV, like Disney movie, or like, one of those, the ones that were like more popular back in the day, they probably still make them. The kind of like sci-fi, but all the characters are fun and that kind of thing. And it just didn't mesh super well for me. I think this is definitely the kind of book that if you're looking for a light, kind of fun, maybe a little bit silly, sci-fi type of read that's pretty quick, this would be a great one for that. It's just to kind of, turn off your brain and enjoy a fun story. This is that kind of story, and I always struggle with those kinds of stories because if you've seen my videos, I tend to analyze things sometimes too much, and I just really struggle to turn off that part of my brain. And so that's kind of where I ran it here, where some of the character decisions just didn't make a ton of sense to me. We're introduced to a very cheesy, over-the-top kind of villain. Characters go from barely knowing each other to like, we're a family, let's do this together, we're in it till the end. And it just didn't feel realistic to me. I know, and it's sci-fi, and it's, interdimensional travel, so I'm talking about realism, but it was just kind of the thing where, like, I see what it was going for, and I don't think this was bad by any means. That's not really what I was expecting. And that's kind of where I ended up hitting on this one. Without getting into spoilers too, there's one particular character who is pretty relevant throughout, who's just kind of the jokester, and varied from being like sometimes mildly funny. Like there was a scene toward the end that was really, really predictable, but it worked. It's a joke that's been done. It's, probably lots of times, but it worked. But there are other times where he was just kind of annoying, and did a lot of the different things like, should we really be talking about this now? Well, no, but let's do it anyway. Just where it's like taking it and trying to do this kind of story, it ended up feeling a little bit juvenile at points to me, which, like I said, is not necessarily a bad thing, and I feel like using the word juvenile has that kind of bad connotation, but there were parts where it was definitely more juvenile humor, and I think that was largely intentional because that's kind of what you're supposed to get from that particular character. Once again, so even the serious characters weren't serious at all by the time we get to the end of the story, so it was just kind of one of those things where we get a little bit silly for my tastes. I think it can work, but I also think it depends, and it needs to be kind of set up that way and be consistent. And so if you're setting it up right away is kind of silly, that's fine, but I felt like the tone of what this started out, taking it pretty seriously, with, like it's not just, the cute thing. It's like, it's this person that since they were a child, there's these horrible world-ending cataclysms, and then they move to a different one and have to try to figure out and adjust how to live as the new version of themselves. That sounds really interesting, and that's what really pulled me into this one. And, so you've already kind of done that. It's sort of, the interdimensional, so introducing that elements, but then we don't really get that. Like that's set up, like that's what we're going to be on, but we're really just focusing on this one main storyline that involves very little of that kind of thing. I feel like this as a slower, more serious story, I would have been more to my personal taste, where we are really focusing on that, seeing this person, trying to adapt to their new life, and then we find out there's more going on that would kind of work. But it was more like, oh, I'm doing this and it's going to be fine. I'm like, oh my gosh, did you hear about this thing? Let's go find out about that. And it didn't really flow particularly well. It was pretty fast paced. Like I said, it's a short novel, and I think it's that kind of the fun, like popcorn sci-fi type novel that I think would work for others. But it's just, I could not stop myself from just overanalyzing the heck out of it. And there were some times, especially like I said, the further we went, it seemed like it got sillier. Even though there were some very serious consequences, it just felt like we kept devolving with the tone to be less and less serious, including like there's a very serious character who is like a genius and has been studying all kinds of technology, and it's like a very important part that's kind of introduced in a weird way too, but says like this would be hella bad, and I'm just like, really, like that's the dialogue we're giving to this character? It didn't really work for me for that reason. And like I said, I know I've mostly been talking about the reasons that this didn't work for me, and I am trying to be objective. Like I said, I don't think this was a bad book. I do think this was really more of a taste thing. This just did not mesh particularly well with my taste, and after doing the 10% sample, I thought I was getting a very different book, so it's kind of about those expectations. So like I said, if you like a fun, light sci-fi read, this was a pretty solid book and was well written in that regard. If you know that's what you're getting, it's not what I was expecting, nor really what I was wanting out of it. So I ended up being a little bit lower on this than I may have otherwise been, with reasonable expectations. But overall, I just think it's probably just not my cup of tea, is what it comes down to here with it. So that said, we've had kind of, I feel like some mixed results with the SPSFC so far. Some I've liked, some I've not been a huge fan of. I know the next one I'm reading is a very YA story that I already know is not my taste. I'm still planning on reading it and just kind of giving my objective thoughts. But I think that's just kind of one of those things, is when you're reading a book that you normally wouldn't read, it's not going to be your taste. I do remember it being well written though. And like I said, this one was not poorly written by any means either. So hopefully I'll still be able to find some positives there. But that's kind of where I landed here on Echoes of Another Earth. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What kind of sci-fi do you like to read? Do you like the fun, silly stuff? Do you like more of the hard sci-fi or dark sci-fi kind of thing? I'm still kind of new to sci-fi, so I don't have the biggest collection of experience of things that I've read for it. So it's always interesting to hear what kind of sci-fi different people like. So let me know in the comments. Would love to hear from you. And that's going to be it though for this one. So make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description. As always, for the Wizardly Duo Discord, if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, any books, really anything at all, it is a lot of fun and we'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.